Alright guys, today we're going to take a look a little bit about Civil War in American life and the after effects of the Emancipation Proclamation. More than 189,000 African Americans served in the Union Army and Navy, and more than half were escaped slaves. They risked quite a bit to do that, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Probably the most famous, though, of all of the African American regiments, there was the 54th Massachusetts, one of the first, commanded by this man, Colonel Robert Gould Shaw. They lead a very devastating battle against Fort Wagner in South Carolina, where more than half the regiment was killed. The risk they faced, though, and all units faced, really came out of a proclamation from the South. The slaves in the South, though, that stayed, resisted slavery everywhere they could. They worked slowly or damaged equipment. Some worked as spies. Some even refused to work for their masters and overseers fighting in the war. Both sides are really divided over this war. The South is divided because the regions with large slaveholding populations, they support the war a little bit more than others. They objected to men from their states being forced to serve under officers from other states, and there were peace protests throughout. There were a lot of Northerners who were angry about the Emancipation Proclamation. Others said that the South had a right to secede. Some Northern Democrats blamed Lincoln for forcing the South into the war. They came to be known as the Copperheads after the poisonous snake, really common in Indiana and Ohio, and they demanded peace immediately. Some people would encourage soldiers to desert and return home. Others freed prisoners of war. Both Lincoln and Jefferson Davis suspended the writ of habeas corpus to be told the charges against you. It's guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution. And more than 13,000 people were held without trial in the North. Almost 500,000 men deserted during the war. A half returned after their crops were planted at home. But at any time, a third to a half were absent without leave. And both sides adopted draft laws. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Riots broke out in New York throughout the entire city over this, really right after the Emancipation Proclamation, because many were angry about this war now being about ending slavery. You could pay $300 in the North to get out of the draft. If you owned 20 more slaves in the South, you could get out of the draft. They took workers away from the northern factories because of the draft laws. There was an income tax in the North for the first time in U.S. history to pay for the war. Both sides printed money, which led to inflation. Prices rose in the North by 80%, in the South by 4,000% in some areas. Women also helped in this war. Some worked as spies. A lot of them took over the farms and the businesses, and some of them even became nurses. There are about 10,000 of them in the North, including Clara Barton here, who would go on to found the American Red Cross during World War I. Totally changed a little bit of the perception of what women could do. Now, it's not going to make a massive change the way the period after World War II will. Thanks, guys, for paying attention. Hopefully, we took good notes, and we'll see you tomorrow.